Morning glory, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Back on the West Coast after flying all day yesterday. Headwinds. Oh, my gosh, the headwinds. Luckily, I had Chuck Box's brand new book, Long Range, which I read every page of. Flew from the Beltway to Chicago and from Chicago out to the West Coast. Took forever to get here, beating against the wind. But Long Range made it worth the while. Chuck Box's new book. And while I was doing that, President Trump came out and did exactly the smart thing. Put Vice President Pence in charge of the White House task force, the administration-wide task force. I expect markets to be very calm today because coronavirus is, the more you understand about it, the less you're worried about it. About 80% of the cases worldwide. China did a massive study, and there are other indications that this is absolutely rock solid. 8 out of 10 simply are bad colds, flus. 20% can develop into pneumonia, and of those 20%, a few will result in fatality, usually with comorbidities. But good move by the president yesterday, because what you got to do about it is overwhelm innuendo, rumor, and panic with information. The president did that yesterday in the White House. He came out talking about preparedness at 6 p.m. East Coast time. Cut number 21, the president for the rundown.
Very, very ready for this, for anything, whether it's going to be a breakout of larger proportions or whether or not we're at that very low level. And we want to keep it that way. So we're at the low level. As they get better, we take them off the list so that we're going to be pretty soon at only 5 people. And we could be at just 1 or 2 people over the next short period of time. So we've had very good luck. The Johns Hopkins, I guess it is a highly respected, great place. They did a study, comprehensive, the country's best and worst prepared for an epidemic. And the United States is now, we're rated number 1. We're rated number 1 for being prepared. This is a list of different countries. I don't want to get in your way, especially since you do such a good job. This is a list of the different countries. The United States is rated number 1, most prepared. United Kingdom, Netherlands, Australia, Canada, Thailand, Sweden, Denmark, South Korea, Finland. This is a list of the best rated countries in the world.
And that, he's right. We are well prepared. And all he has to do is get someone out there to talk about how well prepared we are. And he did that yesterday by naming the vice president Cut 22.
And what I've done is I'm going to be announcing exactly right now that I'm going to be putting our Vice President, Mike Pence, in charge. And Mike will be working with the professionals, doctors, and everybody else that's working. The team is brilliant. I spent a lot of time with the team over the last couple of weeks, but they're totally brilliant. And we're doing really well. And Mike is going to be in charge, and Mike will report back to me. But he's got a certain talent for this, and I'm going to ask Mike Pence to say a few words, please. Thank you.
And then Mike Pence gets up here, and this is why you want him being the lead messaging person in an administration that sometimes competes within itself for top dog spot. There's no doubting the vice president's number 2 in the government. He steps up, cut number 24.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Trump's made clear from the first days of this administration we have no higher priority than the safety, security, health, and well-being of the American people. And from the first word of an outbreak of the coronavirus, the president took unprecedented steps to protect the American people from the spread of this disease. He recounted those briefly, but the establishment of travel restrictions, aggressive quarantine effort of Americans that are returning, a declaration of a public health emergency, and establishing the White House Corona Task Force are all reflective of the urgency that the president has brought to a whole of government approach.
Now, he continued on, and this is the heart of yesterday. Mike Pence just lays out why the threat of coronavirus remains low for Americans. There are 82,449 cases worldwide. 2,809 people have died. 32,756 people have completely recovered, and it's mostly in Asia, South Korea, some in Italy. It will eventually get here and circulate wider than it is, but then Mike Pence lays out why, gives you the rundown of why you should not be worried. Cut 29.
As a former governor from the state where the first MERS case emerged in 2014. I know full well the importance of presidential leadership, the importance of administration leadership, and the vital role of partnerships of state and local governments and health authorities in responding to the potential threat of dangerous infectious diseases. And I look forward, Mr. President, to serving in this role and bringing together all the members of the Corona Task Force that you've established, HHS, CDC, DHS, the Department of Transportation, and State. This team has been, at your direction, Mr. President, meeting every day since it was established. My role will be to continue to bring that team together, to bring to the President the best options for action to see to the safety and well-being and health of the American people. We'll also be continuing to reach out to governors, state and local officials. In fact, in the recent days, the White House met with over 40 state, county, and city health officials from over 30 states and territories to discuss how to respond to the potential threat of the coronavirus. We'll be working with them in renewed ways to make sure they have the resources to be able to respond. And as the President said, we'll be adding additional personnel here at the White House to support our efforts on the President's behalf. We'll also be working with members of Congress to ensure that the resources are available for this whole of government response, and we'll be working very closely with Secretary Azar and his team that have done an outstanding job communicating to the public to ensure the American people have the best information on ways to protect themselves and their families, and also that the public has the most timely information on the potential threat to the American people. Mr. President, as we've been briefed, while the threat to the American public remains low of a spread of the coronavirus, you have directed this team to take all steps necessary to continue to ensure the health and well-being of the American people. And the people of this country can be confident that under your leadership, we will continue to bring the full resources of the federal government in coordination with our state and local partners to see to the health and well-being and to the effective response to the coronavirus here in the United States of America.
That's exactly what needed to be said. It's what Peter Navarro said on the show yesterday. It's what I wrote about earlier in the Washington Post. You just got to focus attention, repeat again and again. We're fine, we're fine, we're fine. And make sure you're getting vaccines developed, cures explored. Donald Trump talked about the vaccine, by the way, cut number 25.
We have in quarantine those infected and those at risk. We have a lot of great quarantine facilities. We're rapidly developing a vaccine, and they can speak to you. The professionals can speak to you about that. The vaccine is coming along well, and in speaking to the doctors, we think this is something that we can develop fairly rapidly, a vaccine for the future, and coordinate with the support of our partners. We have great relationships with all of the countries that we're talking about. Some it's a fairly large number of countries. Some it's one person. And many countries have no problem whatsoever. And we'll see what happens. But we're very, very ready for this, for anything, whether it's going to be a breakout of larger proportions or whether or not we're at that very low level.
And he went on to say, cut number 28. It's not inevitable that it will get to China levels or South Korea levels. Cut 28.
CDC said yesterday that they believe it's inevitable that the virus will spread in the United States, and it's not a question of if, but when. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I don't think it's inevitable. It probably will. It possibly will. It could be at a very small level, or it could be at a larger level. Whatever happens, we're totally prepared. We have the best people in the world. You see that from the study. We have the best prepared people, the best people in the world. Congress is willing to give us much more than we're even asking for. That's nice for a change. But we are totally ready, willing, and able. It's a term that we use. It's ready, willing, and able.
And he's right, and he did the right thing. The rundown for yesterday is President Trump takes control, elevates Mike Pence. They start the information flowing. And people start to calm down as they realize most of the economic disruption is now priced into the market. There might be a little bit here and a little bit there that is a disruptor, but generally speaking, everything's just fine now that we've actually started to pay attention. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back. Lots more on today's Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I was flying against the wind yesterday. East to west took forever, but thanks to Chuck Box's new book, Long Range, the time flew by. But I missed the president's press conference, so I'm playing it for myself as much as for you. Very glad that he talked about the stock market. You don't want to hear... we had Brian Westbury on Monday. Very calming. Peter Navarro yesterday, very calming. You should not sell out of the market. You should not fear that the supply chain disruption is going to destroy the American economy. That's not happening. Some companies are going to take some quarterly earnings hits. That's now been priced into the market. But Trump was right to say, the president was right to say that the stock market debate's got a lot, the stock market decline has a lot of connections to a lot of things, primarily coronavirus, but there's also that Democratic debate in the background. Cut number 26.
I think the stock market of something I know a lot about. I think it took a hit maybe for two reasons. I think they look at the people that you watched debating last night and they say if there's even a possibility that can happen, I think it really takes a hit because of that. And it certainly took a hit because of this. And I understand that also because of supply chains and various other things and people coming in. But I think this.
Yeah, people coming in. Now, in the Financial Times this morning, this is the business story of the day. Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com, Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian. Together they are, I don't think they're sleeping because the 10-year Treasury is at its all-time low, 1.31%, which means it's never been cheaper to borrow money out of your house, to refinance your house, consolidate debt. It's never been cheaper to buy a house, to become a co-borrowing, non-occupying borrower, meaning that you are not living in the house, you're just using your credit to help your son or daughter, grandson, granddaughter get into their first house. Whatever it is, now is the best time in the world to be a mortgage lender, and that's what AndrewandTodd.com are. Call them at 888-888-1172. They were Sierra Pacific, long-time lenders. 888-888-1172 or AndrewandTodd.com. EU officials weigh risks of Italy-style virus clusters across the bloc. Now, I think this is also going to calm down as people realize this is a supply chain issue, not a mortality issue. It's got 2% mortality. Hopefully they'll get cures for it very, very quickly. It just is not, it's not a threat to you. It's a threat to the economy, which has now been priced in. So just chill a little bit, people. One of the key things that Trump did was to shut down incoming flights from China. He mentioned that yesterday, the president did, in cut number 23.
We have, through some very good early decisions that were actually ridiculed at the beginning, we closed up our borders to flights coming in from certain areas that were hit by the coronavirus and hit pretty hard. And we did it very early. A lot of people thought we shouldn't have done it that early, and we did, and it turned out to be a very good thing. And the number one priority from our standpoint is the health and safety of the American people, and that's the way I viewed it when I made that decision. Because of all we've done, the risk to the American people remains very low. And we have the greatest experts in the world, really in the world, right here. The people that are called upon by other countries when things like this happen. We're ready to adapt, and we're ready to do whatever we have to as the disease spreads, if it spreads.
Now, it's not going to be without bumps. There will be stock market bumps as various companies report that their earnings are in trouble. And it'll all price in. And as Brian Westbury said on Monday, then it will all price out. Do not dump your stocks and run away. You'll get burned if you try and time the market. One more thing. Donald Trump says Congress will take whatever you want to give us on funding because we got to buy, diagnostic kits and stuff like that. Cut number 27.
Mr. President, have you been presented any plans that would involve quarantining cities like we saw in China, and what would have to happen for you to take a
we
step like that?
We do have plans of on a much larger scale, should we need that. We're working with states. We're working with virtually every state. And we do have plans on a larger scale if we need it. We don't think we're going to need it, but, you always have to be prepared. And, again, Congress is talking to us about funding, and we're getting far more than what we asked for, and I guess the best thing to do is take it. We'll take it.
How much are you willing to, Mr. President, how much are you willing to give? How much money are you willing to give Congress if they're going $6
Well,
billion
we're
more
going to see,
than
but we'll take care of states because states are working very hard. We have hospitals in states that make rooms available, and they're building quarantine areas where you can keep people safely. We're working really well with states. It's a very big part of it.
It's a very big part of it. That's why the Mike Pence decision was such a great decision. Donald Trump gets props today, as does Mike Pence, as does American preparedness. Very, very good news. I'll be right back on the Democratic bad news out of South Carolina. Bernie's going to win everything, friends. He's going to be their nominee. Stay tuned. There's always one song you play when you go to the dive bar of your youth. Ours is Lefty and Jim's in Warren, Ohio. I don't even know if Lefty and Jim's is still open. I hope so. So you go into Lefty and Jim's. And by the way, when I was 18, you could drink beer, in quotes, 3-2 beer. And I always would play this song, Rolling Stone. Because Dylan don't go to his concerts anymore. Guy's a genius and a Nobel laureate, but kind of lost his voice. Your next meal, friends, is why I asked this to be played. Your next meal. Food for the Poor is going to get the next meal to the hungriest people of our hemisphere in Guatemala. And I believe it is the thing you ought to be doing for Lent. Now, Lent began yesterday. I noticed a lot of people on the airplane did not eat. I was on 2 airplanes yesterday, Beltway to Chicago, Chicago to California, and offered meal service on both planes. I noticed a lot of people not eating because in the Catholic tradition specifically, and more broadly in Christianity, a lot of people have one meal. You don't have to do that when you're over 60, by the way. You have to abstain from meat on Ash Wednesday and every Friday in Lent, but you fast on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And so a lot of people were not eating, and they're doing their Lenten observance. And our steward says to me, I'm not drinking for Lent. And she and the guy next to me start laughing about that. That's not going to be possible to keep up. And I didn't say anything. It's a great Lenten observation. If you like to drink and you don't drink, that's great. Some people give up chocolate. Old, ancient, deep, as Tom Donnelly says in Dominion, sometimes people don't even know how old the practices are that they are living with because of the Christianization of the West. Even people who are completely secular. Richard Dawkins doesn't know how much the Dominion, as Tom Holland, did I say Donnelly? Tom Holland, his breathtaking book, Dominion, just makes it clear. Practices like Lent are deeply embedded in the psyche of the West. But the thing that you ought to embed in your Lenten practice is the reality of hunger in the world. If you go to the top of HughHewitt.com, you're going to see feed starving families. That's the Food for the Poor ask. And I started off yesterday, thanks to many of you came in strong, just like the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I did at the start. I'm going to make it a regular weekly Lenten observance on Monday to make another donation. Some of you might want to think about making a donation a day. Take whatever your total amount is, divide it by 40, and go every day. That's a good Lenten observation. Because then you'll be helping out people like this Guatemalan grandmother, Placida, who had 9 family members living in her home. Our great Salem team, including our wonderful friend Tom Tradup, asked her what she would say to encourage my listeners to donate to Food for the Poor.
I would tell them to ask God to touch their heart. God will send people like you. I want to make sure that you get the idea that you are the presence of Jesus here with us. I worry when I am not here, when God will call me to heaven. I'm worried what is going to be with them.
Because what she's saying is it's tougher for a rich man to enter through the eye of a needle. Tom Holland talks about this in Dominion. She's talking, by the way, to our friend Tom Tradup. Let's trash Tradup a little bit, Dwayne.
Sign me up for that.
Yeah, well, let's just talk trash Tradup. Even though he is the curmudgeon of curmudgeons. He is the official Salem curmudgeon. That's what his job title is, curmudgeon. Am I right about that?
Pretty much.
It's Tom Tradup, Vice President for curmudgeonly duties. And Tom Tradup, though, has a heart for poor people. You wouldn't know it, because, I mean, if he came in here, he would grumble at Ben and yell at Adam and knock things over in Dwayne's studio and tell me I'm doing it all wrong. But that's okay, because we love Tom. Tom goes on these Food for the Poor trips, and he gets this great audio, and they look at him, and they see the man who's bringing food. And Tom is not nimble. Is that fair to say?
Tom was not nimble 3 knees ago.
3 knees ago, he was not nimble, but he makes these trips and he goes into these highlands and he hikes around. He goes everywhere because, man, he's a believer. And Food for the Poor is what manifest that belief, and that's why we do so wonderful, because people like Tom go and talk to people like Placida to tell you about it. For just $80, you can bless a child with food for an entire year and water for life. Just go to HughHewitt.com, click on that Feed Starving Families banner at the very top. Feed Starving Families. Or you can call right now, 855-359-HOPE. Don't do that if you're driving, of course. 855-359-4673. Show the love of Christ to a hungry child through our friends at Food for the Poor. We love you, Curmudgeon Trotta. We love you. But the people of Guatemala love you more. Over at the top of HughHewitt.com. All right, we have had an official breakout of the Joe Biden virus. If you could see my website, my studio, you would see that I have a split screen with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Are there 8 or 9 bars? There are 8. 1, 2.
34 minutes after the
I
hour.
don't want that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I got 56 sound bites times 2 screens.
You know, one thing that Curmudgeon Tom would say is, why did you put that in there
Well, he would.
to let him play with?
Well, I've got 100. What's 56 times 2? 112. That's why I'm not in charge of coronavirus updates. Mike Pence is not going to call the Batcave today and say, we'd like you to help out with the...
there is 63 cuts per page.
So that would be 126 cuts.
You have 63 cuts per page.
So that way I've got 2 pages.
Okay.
So 126 cuts.
Yes.
All right. So of these 126 cuts, I have them all in rows of 8.
9.
9. Rows of 9.
Yes.
And in these rows of 9, we have a Joe Biden row.
And a little bit.
Because Joe Biden is broken out of his row.
Yes.
We can no longer contain Joe Biden.
Joe Biden cannot be contained.
Joe Biden cannot be contained. So we're going to begin at the row and just run down the row.
Let me tell you, I think I'm more in step with the lingo than any of them. Come on, man. Come on. Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. The phone.
A personal
Iran is
favorite.
14 million people.
No, it's got 80 million people.
Iran is 14 million people.
No, it's got 80 million people, Joe.
Iran is 14 million.
I guess we're not getting them off of that.
You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier.
No, I'm not. It's 80 million people.
You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate.
No, you're
No,
not.
you're not. No, you're not.
See,
You're
help out
a
and
candidate
vote
for the
Biden.
Democratic nomination.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate.
No, you're not.
Look me over. You like we see, help out. If not,
No,
vote
you didn't meet with Jung
Making the
Yelping.
case that My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate.
I'm going to have a Democratic debate here.
Did you loop it?
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robbins Island.
Why am I stopping? No one else stops. Sometimes I wake up and I think it's 1920 and not 2020.
Yeah, I bet he does.
100 rounds and a bullet and a clip with a
Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robbins Island.
Make sure you have the record player on at night. I think I'm more in step with
Man,
the
where's
lingo
Dustin
than any of them.
Hoffman? There's an outbreak. Where's the helicopter? Where's Cuba Gooden Jr. in the helicopter playing
Joe
chicken?
Biden. Now, yesterday I saw, sitting on the ground in O'Hare, I saw it's a Joe Biden breakout. We may have to do that a few times. We were on the ground in Chicago and a little bit delayed. And everybody's sick, right? Everybody's sick. And they're all just yelling at each other and people are coughing to their elbows and things like that. But I see that Mitch McConnell, I believe in Mitch. I'm a great believer in Mitch. Mitch McConnell says, I'm not going to tell the Democrats who to nominate. Bernie Sanders could be pretty good. And I think to myself, throw me into the briar patch, Mitch. Mitch wants to run against Bernie. Now, I think Bernie is going to be a very tough person to beat. But as I said to a Republican last night, we absolutely have to have this conversation in America. Quote, democratic socialism is just socialism, which is just a disaster for places like Venezuela and Cuba and every other place that's been tried, Nicaragua. It's a disaster. It's a horrible, tyrannical system. It is a variant of communism. It is a terrible, horrible system. Mike Bloomberg said that. I didn't say that. And what we need to do is have that choice. So if you're filling out your ballot today, if you're in California, I want you to vote for Dr. Ken Williams, way down at the end of the ballot, running for Orange County Board of Education. If you're in Virginia, I want you to vote for Bernie Sanders. Wherever you are, I want you to vote for Bernie Sanders. I want you to vote for Bernie Sanders because we have to have this debate. Now, I've got a column coming out in the Washington Post today about how this debate ought to be held because it cannot be a train wreck like I just had on the radio where people are talking over each other. You can't hear anything, even when it's Joe Biden talking over Joe Biden. All right? You just can't.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over if you like to see, help out. If not,
I just can't get over it. But I think maybe Mitch really wants to run against Joe Biden. Joe Biden was in South Carolina yesterday talking about the South Africa story, cut number 11.
This day, 30 years ago, Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robbins Island.
Andrew Young says, no, that didn't happen. In fact, then they backtracked a little bit and said, no, he was separated and detained at the airport, which we also don't believe happened. Joe just makes stuff up. But Mitch McConnell says, as long as I'm in charge of the Senate, nothing is happening. Cut number 17.
2 minutes.
Whether it's Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, or somebody else, the nominee for president on the Democratic side is going to be on a path to try to turn America into a socialist country. We're not going to let that happen. Donald Trump's still in the White House, and as long as I'm majority leader of the Senate, I get to set the agenda. That's why I call myself the Grim Reaper. We will not have the Green New Deal and will not have Medicare for none as long as I'm majority leader of the Senate.
That's why we love Mitch McConnell. Honor-bound coffee. It's right here. It's what I'm drinking. It's what you ought to be drinking. Honorboundcoffee.com. 100% of the profits from this great brew. 4 different brews, 4 different grinds. It is a great, great, great cup of coffee. More importantly, 100% of the profits go to help military families, and their needs are great and growing. And our friends Pete and Seth Talbot started Honor Bound Coffee to help them. Please go and subscribe. 2 bags of coffee for the price of 1. And it's time for ReliefFactor.com. And boy, did I need it yesterday. It's just, honestly, when you fly into the jet stream, they talk about beating into the wind back in the days of the sail ships. Well, we were beating into the wind yesterday. I'm glad I never had to do that. But that means sitting. Very bad for the back, very bad for every part of you. Luckily, I've got lukewarm coffee and ReliefFactor.com. There are my 4 pills. Down the hatch, I carry in resveratrol, omega, and what did I have? Resveratrol, omega, I carry in curcumin. Those 4 natural supplements combine to support the temporary relief of minor aches and pains, as does stretching, as does exercise. And by the way, if you're getting older, you're going to need this more and more. Go get your ReliefFactor.com. $19.95 gets you started. We check in next with Michael Oren from Israel on their election, which looms. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt back on the West Coast. Next week, Israel votes for the third time in a year. And if you were to see the New York Times come out with a headline a week before the election that says Democratic nominee changing their strategy 5 days before the election in November, you would know that the Democratic nominee was in big trouble. Well, the equivalent, Haaretz, comes out with a headline this morning, bleeding seats. Benny Gantz changes his strategy days before the Israeli election. I think I know what this means, but I'll ask Dr. Michael Oren, who joins us from Israel, former Deputy Minister of Israel, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, friend of the program. Good morning, Dr. Oren.
Good morning, Hugh.
What does that?
He's in trouble.
Yeah, well, explain how much trouble. What's going on?
Well, what happened? Benny Gantz was running on a platform of attacking Netanyahu on the fact that he's facing 3 charges of corruption. He's been indicted. And he was running on a platform of, I'm clean, and this guy isn't. And all of a sudden, now Benny Gantz is being indicted for corruption for a job, the head of a company he held before entering politics. And the company was under investigation. He hadn't been, and now apparently he is.
Bleeding seats suggests maybe also voters are tired of this, and they know they can give Likud a majority. Is there any of that going on, Michael Oren?
Not so much, because people who would vote for Benny Gantz would not necessarily go over to the next block. We have to stop looking at the individuals, even looking at the parties, but look at the blocks. And the blocks have been neck and neck. If there is a center right-wing block, there's a center left-wing block. And the chances of someone who's sort of disaffected, disappointed in Benny Gantz going over and voting to a different block is less. And the blocks remain very much neck and neck.
So what are we looking at? But then if I want Americans to understand this, especially my new affiliates, whichever party gets the most seats gets the first ticket to try and form a government, right?
Yes, but that doesn't mean they can form a government. And there have been cases now in Israel's history where the party that gets fewer seats is actually the party that's best able of putting together a government. I think electoral college, Hugh.
Okay, so the recommend that comes to the president, explain that process for, again, American voters are going to try and sift through this next week.
Okay, so the person who, it's saying Netanyahu gets 1 or 2 more seats, he will then go to the president and say, I'm best able to form a government. He will then have a certain amount of time to doing it, usually about 21 days. He can get an extension for another 14 days. The math gets rather complicated, but this is the bottom line. He has an opportunity to cobble together a coalition from various parties. If he can't, then Benny Gantz, the head of the major opposition party, will have that opportunity. The major swing party here will be Lieberman's Israel is Our Home party. It has always been the swing party. It hasn't succeeded in joining one of the 2 blocks in the past. It is a right-wing, usually anti-religious party. And so Benny Gantz may be anti-religious. Netanyahu is going to be right-wing. So Lieberman finds himself in a situation where he can't cobble together a national unity government, which is what he would want to do. I hope this is sufficiently complex.
It is, but I don't understand why, if Gantz is under threat of indictment, and I have been I don't know how you can get through 3 elections and only have the corruption charges surface in round 3. How does that happen, Michael Oren?
Well, there was an investigation, and Netanyahu's camp was complaining that only the prime minister had been under investigation, that the police had been ignoring the malfeasance, the accusation of malfeasance in the conduct of Benny Gantz's company, investigating only the company and not the person who headed the company, which didn't make any sense. So there was tremendous public pressure as well to open that investigation, and now you see the result.
Now, is there any fatigue that people will just stay home, or is turnout going to be as high as traditional in Israel?
So far, with every successive round of elections, turnout has been higher, not lower.
Interesting.
And Israel traditionally has the highest turnout just about of any democracy in the world. Very high voter turnout.
Are the Russians trying to screw around with your election?
There have been accusations, but it's not the same level of attention that it gets in this country.
And so are you spending time like I do during election cycles on TV as a talking head now, or do you just do that for me? Are you one of these guys?
No, I do it there, too.
Do you?
I do it there, too. But you know something? The painful thing is that nobody knows nothing. And at the end of the day, nobody knows how this election is going to turn out.
But what's interesting is you've got one storyline. It's the third election with one storyline. That's really hard on the journalists. I hope you have sympathy for them.
I just think that there are storylines that we're ignoring. And of course, the virus is a big storyline. We've just now cut off flights from Italy. It's amazing. Now we have flights cut off from all the Asian countries. It's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to our economy. It's going to cause major damage to our foreign relations. Many of these countries are angry at us. I know that the South Koreans are angry at us. And to me, the biggest story of all, Hugh, is what's happening in the United States with Bernie Sanders saying he's not going to attend the AIPAC conference, with Bernie Sanders calling the Israeli government racist, saying he's going to return the U.S. embassy to Tel Aviv away from Jerusalem, and now Buttigieg and also Amy Klobuchar saying they won't come to AIPAC.
But
AIPAC being the organization that represents bipartisanship.
30 seconds, Michael. I thought the biggest story you were going to say is that Iran is screwing the world completely by refusing to be transparent about coronavirus. They're exporting the virus. It's the only dang thing that they can export.
It may be, but Israel has to take into consideration what's going to be the outcome of this election in the United States. Vital for us.
Absolutely. And by the way, I think Democratic voters should know about that, and they will, because they listen to Hugh Hewitt's show, even though they won't admit to it. Dr. Michael Oren, follow him on Twitter. He'll explain it all for you as we get to the Israeli election next week. He'll be back to explain what happened. Don't go anywhere, America. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show straight ahead. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings, everyone. It's Hugh Hewitt. On the 27th day of February 2020, on the West Coast studio today, talking with retired Air Force General David Deptula, now Dean of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies, frequent guest. Good morning, General. Good to have you.
Hey, good morning, Hugh. How are you today?
Great. I want to talk to you about preparedness for the pandemic. But first, I read this and I wanted to ask you about it. There was a headline over at the Military Times. U.S. Air Force starts effort to buy a flying car. It's a Jetsons kind of story. They're looking for something called Agility Prime. What do you know about this, General? And are we going to see flying cars anytime soon?
Well, Hugh, it's an effort to basically initiate a variety of efforts to look at how we might be able to supplement the capabilities that are provided by the V-22, which is a vertical lift aircraft, and stimulate industry to look at different and new technologies to bring those kinds of capabilities where you can take off in small, tiny areas and not have to rely on 1,000-foot, multiple 1,000-foot runways. So we'll see how it turns out. But again, it's a stimulus or an idea to get new ideas out there and to get something concrete that can provide a kind of vertical lift capability in small spaces and do it, let's say, within a year.
Now, General, once you get to vertical lift, the biggest hit on the strategic triad that is part of the Air Force is that you need runways, and runways can be targeted. Once you go to vertical lift and develop the technology to the point like the Osprey, then all of the strategic deterrent the Air Force carries can be deployed anywhere in the world, right?
No, that's true. Although, Hugh, I would say we haven't seen the end of the runway. It's important to understand that there are over 18,000 runways with over 6,000 feet of paved surface around the world. So, you can't move them, but guess what? There are a lot of them. But your point's a very valid one in that it would significantly complicate any adversary where attacking fixed bases. So it is one of the technologies we need to continue to explore to expand the capability of the U.S. Air Force.
Now, a couple of questions that are both politics and defense, General Deptula. DARPA came up in the debate the Democrats had on Tuesday night. President Biden or Vice President Biden attempted to say he ran DARPA, and I thought, oh, he's going off here. Could you tell people what DARPA is, just so they have an idea what the Democrats are talking about here?
Yeah, sure. The DARPA is an acronym that stands for Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. It is an arm of the Department of Defense, and its focus is to look at not near-term technologies, but future technologies, and to see how they might be able to bring or research new and innovative ideas and then transition them to reality to provide advanced capability as rapidly and as soon as possible. Some of the capabilities that have evolved out of Defense Advanced Research Project Agency in the past are things like the Internet.
Yep.
Contrary to Al Gore's statement that he invented the Internet, he didn't. The Defense Advanced Research Project Agency did back in the late 80s. So that's just one example that I think everyone would be familiar with.
Yeah, 40 years from now, we'll be talking about whatever DARPA is up to right now. I'm curious then, that transitions to the next question. There's going to be a supplemental appropriation this week. It's going to be between $4 and $10 billion for the coronavirus epidemic preparation. Part of that should go to the military, I think, because the military was where the 1918 pandemic broke out of. How would you allocate that money? Would you give it to DARPA? Would you give it to the various branches for the military hospitals? What would you do with it?
Well, I think I have not looked into or researched this area in depth. So what I'm providing you is simply my opinion based on what you just told me. That kind of money, given the nature of the coronavirus and the immediacy of its impact, is probably best spent by giving it to the services to take action now, and maybe a portion of it to look at how we deal with these kinds of outbreaks in the future. But the immediacy of the problem would indicate to me that the majority of that money is going to go to the services to take action in our health and through our healthcare systems today, as opposed to the majority of it going to future research.
Have you noticed, General, that when we started bringing back coronavirus patients, we sent them to March Air Force Base? We send them to Air and Marine Corps and naval bases, that the military is always where we turn. Inevitable. With Katrina happening, whenever we always go to the National Guard, we go to the American military, and then I guess you just pay for it out of money lying around the building.
Again, it's an excellent question. It depends on the degree to which the facilities and the personnel are required to handle those issues. We're not talking in the current case. You're not talking about large amounts of money. If it's necessary, a supplemental request would go into the current year's budget to find or to ask for funds from Congress to cover these kinds of unanticipated circumstances.
Are you comfortable with our reliance on the military as sort of the first line of civil defense in the United States? I know we have a North American command, but the military's mission is very different from the public health mission. And in 1918 to 1920 got completely scrambled up. The influenza cooked up on military bases full of people preparing to go to war, coming back from war, and it was wholly unprepared for what it did. Do you think it is actually the best prepared part of the world, of the government now?
Again, I'm not that familiar with the Center for Disease Control's option planning for these kinds of events. So I'm speaking only from my knowledge of military preparedness, and it is an institution in the United States that can be relied upon to deal with these kinds of challenges. But there is a larger issue here, and in mentioning Center for Disease Control, that is an organization in the United States which studies, focuses, and plans for these kinds of outcomes. Not having had a look at what their plans are, that's where ultimately we have to turn to seek some of the solutions to the challenges that we have. But in an immediate basis, the military provides the kinds of options that you're seeing unfolding today.
All right.
Quarantine of some numbers of people, but there's a limit to capacity at those bases.
Now, I want to switch very quickly in the short period of time. I'm all over the map with you because there's a long list of stories, General. I apologize.
Sure.
Secretary Pompeo is going to Doha, and it looks like he's going to sign a peace deal with the Taliban, full of restrictions, but if everything holds, and if there are inter-Afghani talks, it looks like we could be out of there in a year. What do you make of this? When you, the old warrior, you've been dueling with the Taliban for a long time, when you hear about this, what do you think?
It's long overdue. I would tell you that, in fact, the United States met its critical national security objectives with respect to activity in Afghanistan by hostile elements by the end of December of 2001. We removed the Taliban regime from governance. A government friendly to the United States and its allies' principles was established, and the Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps were eliminated. We did that so fast in terms of, and we did it because we brought our asymmetric advantage, and that was air power, to operate in conjunction with the Northern Alliance or friendly forces on the ground to curb and remove the Taliban. And it's at that point we should have said, see you later, we're out of here. If you do it again, we'll be back. But what happened is we did it so fast, we did it before we deployed hundreds of thousands of pairs of boots on the ground, which was the default solution to military operations. And once they got over there, then we had this example of mission creep, where okay, now what do we do? And we transitioned to nation building, all right, building schools and trying to change a collection of 16th century tribes into a modern Jeffersonian democracy, and that's unobtainium. So it's a long time coming that we get out of there.
And I think it's coming Saturday. Now, I don't know if the Taliban will hold up their end of the very detailed bargain, but we will see, and we'll probably talk about it soon. General David Deptula, Dean of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. Follow him on Twitter at Deptula_David. Follow me to the next segment here on The Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Over at Twitter, I just posted, forget Lent. Well, do-over starting day is today. You can help with a contribution to Food for the Poor. It's over at HughHewitt.com. Throughout Lent, I'll remind you the best thing to do is to feed the poor and shelter the homeless, provide clean drinking water. Your generosity helps people like Guatemalan grandmother Placida, who has 9 family members living in her home. She's the grandma. There are 9 of them there. And she says to Tom Trad took the crew down there to Guatemala with Food for the Poor, and he asked her on tape, how would you encourage listeners at the Salem Radio Network, to Hugh Hewitt Show, etc., to donate to Food for the Poor? Here is Placida.
Make sure that you get the idea that you are the presence of Jesus here with us. I worry when I am not here, when God will call me to heaven. I'm worried what is going to be.
She is worried about who's going to take care of the 9 people in her household when she goes to her reward. And Food for the Poor hopefully helps in the development of the village as well as the feeding of the immediate need, because they provide clean water. The only way is economic growth, but the immediate need is food. And that's what Food for the Poor does. And during this Lent, it's more than ashes. It's more than ritual. Some of you are out there with a daily prayer or a daily observance, which is, of course, long traditions in the Christian church. But don't forget almsgiving, which is the first tradition. That's why I love reading Tom's book, Dominion. It's emphasis on Tom Holland's book, Dominion. It's emphasis on traditional Christian almsgiving. Takes it back to the earliest of times in the church. The chapter on Martin of Tours. It's just amazing that this goes back so far. So give your alms through Food for the Poor. Great Christian organization, terrific effectiveness. All you have to do is support it by going to HughHewitt.com and find that at the top. Time for the business story of the morning, which remains the market, brought to you by Andrew and Todd.com. I don't know if those guys ever sleep anymore. When the interest rates are the lowest they've ever been, the 10-year Treasury is at 1.31%. So much money has flowed into the United States that the interest rate is down to 1.31% on the 10-year Treasury. Inverted curve. 3-month Treasury, 1.48%. 30-year Treasury, 1.8%. But the 10-year Treasury, 1.3%. That's the interest rate on which most home mortgage interest rates are based. AndrewandTodd.com will help you get money out of your house, which is now is the time to do it. If you're going to ever pay for college, or you're going to use it to expand the house, or you're going to buy a house, now is the time to call our friends Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian at Sierra Pacific Mortgage, 888-888-1172. Best thing to do is to go to andrewandtodd.com. Microsoft became the latest tech giant to reduce its quarterly outlook based on the outbreak of novel coronavirus. That's slowing production of computers and crimping sales of an array of consumer services and electronics. So it's reduced its usual sales target from $11.15 billion for one division, Windows, to $10.75 billion. Other companies like Apple and HP have done the same thing. I personally bought back into the market on Monday after talking to Brian Westbury, who points out that pandemics just don't last and countries get undervalued, and I went back into Amazon because I figure even if people stay home, they got to get stuff delivered to them. I'm pretty simple when it comes to it. I only buy what you know. That's what I do. And I know that people are just going to have to use Amazon, but they got beat up too. I'm just not worried about it because we're on top of it now. I believe that the president's press conference yesterday will restore confidence in short order, and we're going to get cures, and we're going to show responsiveness, and the Democrats have over-politicized it, and they're going to pay a price. But in the market, there is no better time to buy a house. AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. I'll be right back, America. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Change coming to the Democratic Party. They are going to put forward Bernie Sanders. I think Joe Biden dropping like a rock. Why?
Sometimes I wake up and I think it's 1920 and not 2020.
That's it.
Who in God's name needs 100 rounds and a bullet and a clip with a gun you have?
Why am I stopping? No one else stops. Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador
on the
didn't happen. Soweto, trying to get to see him on Robbins Island. Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto, trying to get to see him on Robbins Island.
It's just too hard to get them all to finish at the same time. I'm just recreating the Democratic debate with just Joe Biden clips. He has fallen apart. And he went down to South Carolina yesterday, and he talked about Georgetown, Delaware, when it was founded. He was only off by 100 years. Cut number 9.
It's great to be in Georgetown. What a beautiful, beautiful town. And this building is magnificent. You know, we have a place called Georgetown, Delaware, that was founded in the 1600s. And it is a little like your town. It is the center of the county in the center, and that is literally the figurative and literal center of the southern county. But they talk like y'all do, kind of funny, you know what I mean?
That is just Joe. Honest to goodness, he's counting on the African American vote, and I think they're looking at him and saying, "Joe, I love you. You did a great job for 100 years, but maybe this isn't your turn." He also explained that his health care plan is only going to cost $740 billion over 10 years. Cut number 10.
6 months. So, folks, look, we can cover everybody. We can get it done. It costs money. My plan costs a lot of money. It costs $740 billion over 10 years. But the way I pay for that is doing one thing.
$74 billion a year for we don't know what. That's Joe Biden. Now, the Fox News montage of the Democratic debate in South Carolina, I've got a piece coming out in the Washington Post as to why it was so bad. I blame management. I blame management at CBS. They are in your ear. I've done these debates. They're in your ear. They're talking at you. Donald Trump should absolutely say, I'm not doing the Presidential Debate Commission. I will talk to the Democratic nominee. I'm going to name a moderator. He or she's going to name a moderator. Those 2 moderators are going to pick a third. We're going to do that 3 times. We'll use the Presidential Debate Commission locations and times. That's fine. But we're not going to give it to a network, and we're not going to have commercial breaks, and we're not going to have a loaded question set because I don't think CBS wanted to make news. I think they are afraid of Mike Bloomberg. That's what I came down to the conclusion. They're afraid of Mike Bloomberg. They don't want to get bought by Mike at the end of this thing and be out of a job. It was such a hands-off, kid gloves debate. They did not want to make news. Fox News montage, cut number 1.
Hey, Bernie, I was talking about I would like program. Senator Sanders,
you get nominated, we'll be relitigating this all year.
Do what I asked.
Look, first of all,
Bernie, let me go. We'd ask respectfully if you would all please try to keep to the time.
Idea. So let's clear this up once and for all. Now, you've got people believing something that is false.
New topics for this whole campaign. I don't know where you got the impression. If you could honor the rules of the debate, thank you. Senator Sanders, you were allowed a quick response, and we would like to allow the other candidates.
Moderator, guys.
Senator Sanders.
Moderator, is it my turn?
Is it my turn? Joe, is it my turn?
That was the debate. That was 2 hours of debate in 30 seconds.
No one else stops. Why am I stopping? No one else stops. Why am I stopping? No one else stops.
That's all we missed. We just needed Howard Dean to give us a Howard Dean. And then we would have had everything. Tim Scott goes on Fox News yesterday and makes a very bold, but I think very reliable prediction. Cut number 2.
About 30% of the overall voters in South Carolina are African Americans. Probably 60% of the Democrat primary on Saturday will be African Americans. Trump had 8% in 2016. I'm predicting he will have at least 12%, a 50% increase coming President Donald Trump's way because his policies are percolating at the right time. It is really hard to deny the success of this administration.
I am telling you, not only is he going to do very well in the African-American community and the Latino community, he's going to do very well everywhere. And that's why they're turning to Bernie. They're a little bit desperate. They know they can't run a free market guy against a free market guy. They're going to have to try and present an argument that you've all been screwed, and all you kids with student loan debt, you're all screwed. And when you borrowed the money, you don't want to pay it back. You're going to get something for free. It's just not going to work very well. And Mitch McConnell talked about the differences between the Democrats who are running cut number 13.
When the Democrats back in 1980 were all pulling for Ronald Reagan to be the nominee because they thought he'd be the easiest to beat.
There are no moderate Democrats. But I agree with Mitch McConnell. You should not try and pick the weakest candidate. You never know. They thought they were getting that with Trump. Turned out to be the only candidate who could have beaten Hillary Clinton. And so I don't know. I think I know who the easiest candidate to beat is. It's Elizabeth Warren, but I didn't vote for her. I voted for Bernie Sanders because I want the clear choice on the ballot for America to make. Do they want to go down that road? That's the Venezuelan road. That's the Nicaraguan road. That's the Cuban road. Do they want to go down that road? I hope we get that choice in the fall because I don't think we want to go down that road. Like 1972, it was put before us. We did not want to go down that road. Now, Bernie had a big rally in Florence, South Carolina yesterday. Now, I'm reading a story right now in the National Interest headline, Bernie Sanders could be unstoppable if he wins South Carolina. Memo to the National Interest, he will be unstoppable if he wins the South Carolina primary. It may take for Tuesday for him to become utterly unstoppable. Nina Turner, who I've appeared with on Meet the Press a few times, talked about Bernie yesterday at a rally, cut number 15.
There's only one, and there's only one. And the Senator Bernard Sanders carried on the tradition of FDR, carried on the tradition of that freedom hallelujah dance, carried on the tradition of overthrowing, carried on the tradition of hallelujah, carried on the tradition of Alabama, carried on the tradition of the working out of our European carried on the tradition of seeing the man.
So the name check there was FDR followed by Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs was a socialist, ran for president before. His secretary was Richard Dreyfuss's mom. I always found that interesting. But Eugene Debs is the real deal socialist, and so is Bernie. Here is Stephen Wokala, the Florence mayor, at the warm-up for Bernie, cut number 16.
All right, Myrtle Beach. All right. How does it feel to be a bunch of radicals? Huh? A bunch of revolutionaries. Bunch of socialists here in Myrtle Beach.
Bernie is, he's got an Axios story this morning on his online engagement. He blows everyone away. He's winning the online political combat. Joe Biden's not even in the game. He is not at 1/4 of the engagement of Bernie. Joe's yesterday's candidate, yesterday's story. Bernie is tomorrow's. For the young people in America, even though he's 79, doesn't matter. They like his ideas. Donald Trump released an ad yesterday simply called Stronger. Cut number 20.
Many choosing to brave the freezing temperatures, and they camped out.
Earlier than early for President Trump's rally.
The temperature is still freezing cold out here. Last time I checked, it was 9 degrees.
My 401k is going up. Everything is going up. Thank you, Donald. I love you.
Colorado was founded by pioneers and prospectors, cowboys and miners who tamed the wilderness, explored the West, and helped make this the greatest nation ever to exist on the face of the earth. 75 years ago this week, our brave United States Marines landed on the shores of Iwo Jima. America is truly a land of heroes. Brave people, great people. This is a truly incredible time for America. We have the best economy in our history. We added another 225,000 brand new beautiful jobs last month. We are in the midst of the great American comeback. That's what we're doing. Our country is stronger today than ever before. While the extreme left left has been wasting America's time. We've been killing terrorists, creating jobs, raising wages, enacting fair trade deals, securing our border, and lifting up citizens of every race, color, religion, and creed. At stake in our present battle is the survival of our nation. Now you have a president who is standing up for America. And we are standing up for the great people of Colorado. America is thriving like never before. And ladies and gentlemen, the best is yet to come.
No, I'm
Donald Trump.
I would say that's a Trump ad. And I play ads by everybody because they're newsworthy. I would say to everyone, the coronavirus could throw off momentum for a little bit. But as Brian Westbury explained on this show on Monday, there's always a rebound from a pandemic-inspired panic. That rebound will hit in the summer, if not before. I don't know how long. Very sophisticated market people are not going to let buying opportunities go past them because of a virus that will be contained and eventually cured. They won't. And when that comeback, that bounce hit's going to hit just in time for the election. Time to remind you about Honor Bound Coffee. Please go and get it. I'm holding in my hand 2 bags for the price of 1 is the sign-up offer for a subscription to honorboundcoffee.com over at their website. Put together by Pete and Seth Talbot, the same entrepreneurs who started ReliefFactor.com. They did this, though, not for entrepreneurial success, so they're very good at the coffee they produce and the various strips that they give you. It's great coffee, but 100% of the profits from this honorboundcoffee.com go to support military families. That's why they're doing it. That's why you should subscribe to it. Never buy coffee again in a store. Honorboundcoffee.com. Got my ReliefFactor.com. Boy, did I need it yesterday. When you sit on an airplane for a total of 8.5 hours, it's just not great. It's like the worst commute ever. And I commute between the coasts because I had to come out here for a speech on behalf of the Nixon Library today. So I flew all day yesterday. ReliefFactor.com makes it possible to just come back quickly from that. The dreaded overhead bag compartment as well. ReliefFactor.com, $19.95 gets you started. Join the tens of thousands of people who use it every day and turn around and go back into your house and get it. All right? Do not try and do your commute without it. Coming right back, Senator Jim Talent, former senator from Missouri, comments on Mike Pence atop the White House effort on coronavirus. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by former United States Senator Jim Talent. He represented the great state of Missouri. Now he represents common sense in all of its forms. Good morning, Senator Talent. What did you make of the president's announcement in putting Mike Pence in charge of the coronavirus task force?
Well, I think having Hugh Hewitt as a senior advisor to the president has been a real plus in this crisis. Congratulations. Bob Graham and I suggested something similar about, I guess, 11 years ago to Obama to put the vice president in charge of preparation against proliferation of potential weapons, including bio-preparation. But I'm glad you got it done. It makes a lot of sense. And I've been very pleased. I just reread the interview with Navarro, and I'm very pleased at what the administration's doing.
Well, and I think the answer to panic is information. I've made this argument, and I think yesterday's press conference was great. The market will take some more hits, but that's just overselling. Brian Westbury was very upbeat on Monday, and I believe Mike Pence gets his phone call returned by everyone in the United States, and he will put an end to any infighting in the administration, and it will be as prepared as you can be.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of infighting, but you're right. I mean, as Bob Graham said at the time, he said there are two people that everybody in the executive branch calls, sir or ma'am, if it's a woman, the president and the vice president. And so I think it makes sense. It raises the visibility of it. Look, they're doing aggressive public health measures to limit and slow the spread of the disease, which I think has been effective. Now, I don't think anybody should be confident we're going to keep this out, but we have certainly slowed the rate of it while they're pursuing the 4-point plan that Navarro talked about. And they're hitting everything that they need to hit: the protective gear, the therapeutics, the vaccine. And he didn't get to talk about point of care diagnostics. Get him on again and have him talk about that, because that's also important.
I noted tonight Vice President Pence is appearing on Sean Hannity's show. Now that's 3 million people. And Sean will give the vice president the opportunity to talk, like I gave Navarro the opportunity to talk, and the vice president's welcome here. That's what people need. They don't need shouted questions. They need the opportunity to explain, here's what we've done, here's what we're doing, here's how we'll respond to various scenarios, and then people calm down.
Yeah, you err on the side of transparency, and whatever the burden ends up being, and I think this is going to be with us for a while, people know what there is to know, and they know what they can do to the extent that they can do anything about it, and it's very helpful. I also I watched the press conference, and I like seeing Bob Kadlec there. I've mentioned his name to you before. He is the best and most experienced guy in this field, both in terms of the medicine and the government side of it. He's the assistant secretary in charge of preparedness at HHS. I want to give him a shout out. I'm sure he's working his butt off, and I hope he's staying healthy.
Now, preparedness means getting every hospital to have an isolation ward. I asked Navarro specifically about respirators because in the book, The Great Influenza, that's what they ran out of. And the biggest danger from influenza or coronavirus is when people get pneumonia and pneumonia gets to the lungs and they have to have the machine breathe for them. That's the biggest danger.
There's a number. That's right. There's a number of things that you need to have in order to have an effective medical response. I was pleased to see Navarro focusing on different therapeutics. He mentioned remdesivir and some other ones, because if we can find a therapeutic that substantially reduces the virulence of the disease, then we have really achieved something, because that affects everything in the system to the good. In other words, we get closer to reducing this to a more like a normal influenza, which would be a huge victory. So I'm glad they're pursuing that. I'm hopeful that this will work, but I think everybody needs to, as the Brits say, keep calm and carry on, and I think communications is a key to that.
Over and over again, and I'm glad to see him. I hope he doesn't limit himself to going on Sean Hannity. I want him on every network. I want him every day having a press conference. And just a word about Pence. He stays on message. He is unflappable. I mean, he just does deliver the message.
Yeah, he really does. And I think he can be the president's point man. By appointing him, I think also Trump is making clear that this is his personal priority within the administration. So I think they've been working together well. I think that they were aggressive and out front with the public health measures, the quarantines. He was criticized at the time, but it was the right thing to do. And now we hold on, we listen, we do what we can do. And we support all these measures that we're taking and all these people who are taking them.
And he said, we'll take as much money as the Senate and House want to give us. We need this much. But my last question, we got a minute, Senator Talent. Will the Democrats lay off politicizing a pandemic? I mean, I can't believe they're doing it.
No, I think the signal is that they don't intend to do it. And if they're going to do it, they better get informed. I'll tell you that, because this is not something where you can take the message card with the 5 message points that the staffer gives you and talk about it and be effective doing it. So, look, if they get informed and they have some constructive criticism, that's fine. If they think they can, just do these one-off Twitter shots and the rest of it, that is not going to be helpful, and I don't think it's going to be helpful for them politically either.
I agree. By the way, who do you think is going to win South Carolina, Senator?
I don't know. I kind of think maybe Biden, but we'll see.
Yeah, but he got to win by a lot to not lose, right?
I agree. I think this is going to go on for a while, but I'm liking Bernie's chances more and more.
You and me both, and I believe unless Joe is a double-digit winner, it's over for Joe, but we'll see. We'll see. Setting the bar, the expectations bar there. Coming right back, I'll ask Chuck Todd the same question, America. Stay tuned. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to everyone listening. 400 affiliates across the world because it's like Christmas Eve for political junkies. Super Tuesday comes but once every 4 years, and it's next Tuesday. The South Carolina primary is the same. It's on Saturday. Joining me to talk about both, Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press. Follow him, of course, on Twitter at Chuck Todd. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Chuck, it's true. Super Tuesday comes but once every 4 years, and we love it much. What's going to happen?
I think we actually don't know. I think it's very possible Biden can win South Carolina by double digits, and a double-digit win, 3 days of momentum, stories, can do a lot to change a conversation. I mean, here's the metric that I'm measuring Super Tuesday by. Who wins? Who has more delegates at the end of the night? Sanders or the combined pairing of Biden and Bloomberg? Throw in Buttigieg in there if you want to. If the group of Bloomberg, Biden, and Buttigieg has more delegates than Sanders, it's going to be a long rest of the primary campaign. But if Sanders has more delegates than that combined trio, game, set, and match.
Game, set, match. Now, you just used the same metric I did with Senator Jim Talent. I said if the vice president comes in with a double-digit win, it's a clear win, and he does get some momentum, although early voting in California doesn't get impacted much. But if he's under 10, Chuck Todd, who goes to him and says this is not working?
The problem is, first of all, Jim Clyburn said this on my air yesterday, that Biden needed a double-digit win. You rarely hear truth bombs like that from politicians who just put their neck out for somebody. I thought that was interesting and notable that Clyburn himself, the day of his endorsement, said, oh, yeah, Joe needs a double-digit win. Anyway, I just find it, yes, he said the obvious, but you don't always hear that from elected officials.
Right. And the conventional wisdom is kind of congealed around he needs a double-digit win.
Yeah, he does. But here's the thing. If you ask Biden to drop out, for who? I mean, if Biden doesn't pull this off, who can? I think there's only one person left that can stop Sanders, and it's Biden. He barely has earned that right to do it. I mean, you sit there and you're like, Pete Buttigieg. It was funny the other night watching Carville after the debate. Carville was almost like disappointed that, the only guy that seemed to understand what to do on that stage last night, or that night,
was Pete Buttigieg, yeah.
And he sort of said it almost in a, and you know what Buttigieg reminds me of? You'll appreciate this analogy. It's like you have this great quarterback room, 3 or 4 great quarterbacks, right? 3 of them are, look like these perfect specimens to be great NFL quarterbacks. And one guy's 5'7", but he knows the playbook better. He reads the defenses better, but you think if I put him out there, he's going to get killed. And you're like, but he's the only one that understands the damn position.
You've just described Baker Mayfield as Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
You just
You hope.
6'1". He got into this fight with a ESPN reporter this week who called him the wrong word, who's now been laid off as a result. But you're right. Pete Buttigieg, people just say he's not big enough or strong enough, et cetera. But I thought he had the best debate.
Right, so did I. And yet he's the only one that seems to understand the current message of the moment. He's the only one that seems to be speaking to figuring out how to bridge this divide. Now, maybe he's the flawed vehicle. Like I said, he's 5'7", and you think he can't see over the offensive lineman, or he's going to get mauled by the pass rush, or whatever it is. But that's the problem the Democrats have, is that, okay, so you whisper into Biden's ear, you got to go. For who? Bernie now? Rally around him now? That's the only reason to tell Joe to get out. Because Bloomberg, to me, has proven unnominatable in this Democratic Party.
You and I just you anticipated where I was going. That was
unnominatable. I think he's unnominatable.
2 disastrous debates in a row. They tried. I mean, I don't know if I could bomb that badly, and I'm not a funny guy. I can't do stand up. I don't know if I could deliver a joke more inelegantly than the mayor did. It was cringeworthy.
I will give them credit for this, and maybe this was a problem. Bloomberg did really well during the commercial break for that debate. Because I kept seeing Bloomberg ads. The problem was the Bloomberg and the TV ads was much more on message than the Bloomberg you saw on the debate stage.
Now, I've got a column coming out today in the Post, Chuck, in which I have to, I disclose to everyone I work for NBC, and therefore you can take this as you want. I thought CBS let it get away from them. I don't blame the talent on the stage. I blame the fact that it looked a little scripted to me, and they weren't listening. When Joe Biden said 150 million people dead from gun violence, no one corrects him. And Mayor Bloomberg got off with murder on the NDA, and Elizabeth Warren drops a kill it line. I mean, it's just...
my defense of them is simply this. This is the first one they've done. First one many of them had ever done. It's hard to do this first time when you have extraordinarily experienced debaters on stage. You had 6 of the 7 that have been through the ringer and know every one of this. So I just think that that's a case where, you have a little experience goes a long way.
They struck the line from the column because it's too complicated. But I said, you need a Jeff Zucker or an Andy Lack. You need someone who has run this team 100 times, and you got to do the reps. I don't know how much time you put into your debate prep at CNN. When I was doing it, we did hours.
The biggest thing we do, and this is a huge thing for any of us. Okay, we all have egos. When you get your debate room, and the way we run a debate room, we're all in there. When you get your debate room to the point where the moderators don't know, everybody is comfortable with every question, so that anybody could ask any of the questions you agreed to. You don't get married to a question. The minute you have multiple moderators and you let a moderator get married to a question, that's when you mess up your flow. That's when you stop listening to the candidates. When you have everybody check their own egos at the door and you say, I own no question, that's when you can let the debate be the debate.
That's excellent advice. Talk to me a little bit about the booth, though, in your ear. I've been there and done that. You've been there and done that more. The people in the booth have to be listening to what's being said. And I actually believe you need the chime because these candidates are experienced and they ran right over these moderators.
Well, we also have multiple people. Look, I can tell, I don't know what others do. I can tell you what we do. We have somebody, that only is listening to the answers, so that the person in our ear can be worrying about both logistics and that. I mean, we have people assigned to certain things because we're all nervous about missing something said while you're worrying about the next question or you're worrying about the timekeeper. There's a lot you have to worry about as a moderator, as you know. So you need help in that control room. We have people who do nothing but listen to the editorial going, whoa, that's new. And then they say, oh, what, da-da-da-da-da, Trust me, there are ways to do this, but you have to have done it a lot before. And my friends over at CBS, this was the only one they've done all year. It's hard to do. It's hard to make your first one. It's like going swimming in the deep end first.
100%.
They could have used one of those primary debates in August or September, basically to get their own sea legs.
So who is most disappointed after that? Michael Bloomberg has got zero traction. I agree with you. He's unnominatable. Pete Buttigieg had the best debate, but no one seemed to pay any attention to him. I don't know that anybody won. Bernie took some hits. That's why I don't think anybody won.
I think that's right, because the Bernie hits were spaghetti at the wall. You saw the possibility of how Bernie could, he doesn't handle criticism well. But Bernie also was really disciplined. I thought to show, sometimes I underestimate Bernie and his ability on message. Like, I was like, what are you doing talking about the CIA and the 50s and all that stuff? However, I thought he was so clever not to even respond to the filibuster attack.
Yep.
He knew how arcane they were. I'm sitting there going, are you guys really attacking him on the filibuster? Do you think anybody in the country watching this debate gives a rat's patootie about the filibuster debate? And Bernie, smart enough to know, you're not talking about the filibuster debate. You're talking about your message. He, as even though he took hits, and he's better at this than everybody gives him credit for. The guy is more focused on talking to the people watching than the other people on that stage. That's why he survived.
To use your football analogy, when you're losing a season, put Andy Dalton under center, not the rookie, because at least you'll stay in the game. Bernie stayed in the game. He stayed on message through the whole thing. So I thought, again, we've got early voting going on. Last inside baseball question. The Nelson Mandela question did not come up. Joe Biden was ready for it. I saw his surrogates talking about it before and after, but it did not come up. Was he hoping it came up?
Oh, I would assume he was.
Yep.
That's something you want to clean up quicker. You don't want to have linger. I have to tell you that's one of those stories. When I saw it and read it, you're like, if he's the nominee, this is going to haunt him for a little while. Not a long while, but this will haunt him for a bit. But let's see if he becomes the nominee first.
You know, I've got 2 lines of Biden quotes on my machine that sits in front of me in a radio studio, Chuck, that I can hit the buttons. It's going to get 8 lines. That's his problem. We'll see if it matters on Super Tuesday. But for South Carolina analysis, make sure you tune into Chuck Todd on Sunday on Meet the Press. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show right now. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Reminding you, Ash Wednesday was yesterday. When you fly across the country like I did, this is a food for the poor pitch. And it's a little elaborate. So I want you to remember at the beginning, go over to foodforthepoor.com or Food for the Poor button at the top of hughhewitt.com and get involved in feeding the lost and the least, almsgiving during Lent. But I was flying yesterday and I had a 2-hour layover in Chicago. Why I had to go to Chicago, I don't know, but I don't run my travel. Other people run my travel. So I leave the Beltway, head to Chicago, hang out for 2 hours, and they keep announcing over the speaker that there will be an Ash Wednesday service in the chapel, which if you've got a 2-hour layover, I would have gone to, except the chapel is outside of the TSA perimeter. How many people among you cast the first stone? I did not go. I do not leave the perimeter when I'm in transit. Not once you get through it. Too many delays. Too many things can happen. Too many alarms can go up. Once you're inside the perimeter, you don't. So my advice is generally move the chapels inside of the TSA perimeter if you ever want anyone to go to them. They're not there for people dropping off at the front. They're there for who are stuck in the airport for hours at a time who are inside the TSA perimeter. That's just my thought. But I was thinking about that because it was Ash Wednesday and a lot of people normally would go get their ashes, but they couldn't because it was outside the TSA perimeter. You could, and we did, the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I, contribute to Food for the Poor. And we do so because we are committed throughout Lent, 40 days, telling you, if you haven't done anything, give some alms. And if you're going to give some alms, do it through Food for the Poor. They're the best. I think they're the best. They get it done. They are an amazing organization. They've been doing this forever. I trust them completely. I know their ethics. I know their integrity. I know how long they've been in the field internationally. Food for the Poor. Go over to hughhewitt.com. Please be generous. They are great sponsors, partners with me for a decade and a half, I think now. And we do this every Lent. They go to different places. This year, they're really focused on Guatemala. Our team went down there because the hunger is so sharp and so severe. Please be generous at hughhewitt.com. Hit that Food for the Poor button. Time for the business story of the day, which, of course, brought to you by andrewandtodd.com. Andrew Delray, Todd Avakian. The business story of the day is actually their business. The business story of the day is the 10-year Treasury. The business story of the day is buying real estate because in market sell-offs, which occur during panics like 2008, 2009, this panic's going to be very short-lived. It might be over by today. I never predict where the market's going to go in the course of a day, but when I see stocks down across Europe by 2.5% and 3%, I always know it ends in Europe and the recovery begins in the United States. Starts in Asia and it ends in America because money comes in. People will take money. Oh, that's quite a sell-off and the economy's in pretty good shape and people are going to make money. And so they start coming back in, markets recover. But for the time being, the 10-year Treasury is at 1.31%. That, my friends, has never happened in the 20 years I've been on the air. That means if you're ever going to buy a house or refinance a house, call Andrew and Todd. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They are lenders. Call andrewandtodd.com today. Go online, fill out a couple of questions, or just call them at 888-888-1172. Never happened. 1.31% might break the 1.3% early this morning. I don't think it's going to stay there because that's just too low. But the 10-year Treasury is the forerunner of where the mortgage industry is, the 15 and the 30-year. If you're ever going to refinance to consolidate debt, if you're ever going to refinance to get money out for college, if you're ever going to refinance, period, do it now. Now, they're swamped, but they have a great team at andrewandtodd.com, a great team. The president was very reassuring yesterday, but it will take a while for the 10-year Treasury to get back to normal. Meanwhile, I want Donald Trump, I want him in your ear as you go to break. Cut 28, President Trump at the White House yesterday.
CDC said yesterday that they believe it's inevitable that the virus will spread in the United States, and it's not a question of if, but when. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I don't think it's inevitable. It probably will. It possibly will. It could be at a very small level or it could be at a larger level. Whatever happens, we're totally prepared. We have the best people in the world. You see that from the study. We have the best prepared people, the best people in the world. Congress is willing to give us much more than we're even asking for. That's nice for a change. But we are totally ready, willing, and able. It's a term that we use.
We are totally prepared. Great message from Donald Trump. Stay tuned. Warrior Dog Foundation next on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, standing by for Mike Ritland of Warrior Dog Foundation. You know, honorboundcoffee.com is one of our sponsors, and honorboundcoffee.com supports military families. And my friend Kelly told the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I about the Warrior Dog Foundation, and we're having some trouble finding Mike Ritland this morning, but I'm not going to be mad at him because he's a former SEAL. He's the founder of it. Take care of dogs who have served our military working dogs when they are retired. And I'm going to recommend to the honorboundcoffee.com folks, Pete and Seth Talbot, this is one of the charities they ought to think about helping out, because the military family includes a lot of unusual aspects, but one of them are these dogs. They've saved thousands of lives. They come to the end of their service lives, and they got to be taken care of. And Mike Ritland, who's a retired SEAL, is actually calls himself a former SEAL. I don't think he retired from the SEALs, but he's the ambassador of the Warrior Dog Foundation. He put it together, and they take care of these animals. And a lot of you have a special place in your heart for dogs. You ought to have a special place in your heart for the Warrior Dog Foundation. And I'll tell you about it whenever we find Mike. Maybe it'll be tomorrow. But honorboundcoffee.com does military families broadly. I'm going to be recommending them to Pete and Seth along with the military. Why? Different places. Let me go back over what I was telling you last segment about andrewandtodd.com. Got to tell you a story about the underlying economy. I look around. I know there's a sell-off in the market. I know people got panicked on Monday and Tuesday, and yesterday was better, and they might have another sell-off today, but I think it'll rebound by the end. They had to price in a bad quarter, maybe 2 bad quarters because of supply chain disruption. Coronavirus is not the bubonic plague. I didn't think until this week we were doing an adequate job communicating, but we started doing an adequate job of communicating, and I'm very optimistic. Here is Alex Azar at the White House yesterday, he's the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who along with Donald Trump and Mike Pence are just out there like Peter Navarro on this show yesterday communicating. This is why I think markets are going to be fine, because we now figured out the best thing to do is just communicate. Here's the Secretary of HHS, cut number 4.
This is the HHS briefing on the China coronavirus, and we aim to do 2 things today. Provide the American public with an update on the risk presented by the virus, and provide the latest update on the actions that President Trump's administration is taking to respond to the outbreak and keep Americans safe. I'm joined today by Dr. Ann Schuchat, the Principal Deputy Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, Dr. Tony Fauci of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, Dr. Robert Kadlec, HHS's Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, and Dr. Stephen Hahn, the Commissioner of Food and Drugs. As of this morning, we still have only 14 cases of the China coronavirus detected here in the United States, involving travel to China or close contacts with those travelers. We have 3 cases among Americans repatriated from Wuhan, and we have 40 cases among American passengers repatriated from the Diamond Princess in Japan. I want to thank the responders and communities that have worked with HHS and the administration to provide these Americans with the treatment they need. I'm also grateful to the governors and other state and local leaders who have worked with us in close partnership so far. The immediate risk to the general American public remains low. But as we have warned, that has the potential to change quickly. There is now community transmission in a number of countries, including outside of Asia. That's deeply concerning, and community spread in other countries will make successful containment at our borders harder and harder. That's why we've already been working closely with state, local, and private sector partners to prepare for mitigating the virus's potential spread in the United States, because we will likely see more cases here, as we have said throughout this episode. Dr. Schuchat will provide some more details on what that will look like, including how we would treat potential cases that arise from community transmission here in the United States. This preparation has been possible in part because of how aggressively President Trump has responded to this outbreak. As soon as we knew of the threat presented by this novel virus, Public health leaders were monitoring it and beginning to prepare. The travel restrictions that the president put in place at the beginning of this month have given our country valuable time to continue to prepare, and that is precisely what those measures were designed to do. That includes working with Congress. Yesterday, the White House sent a request to Congress to make at least $2.5 billion in funding available for preparedness and response. There are 5 major priorities within the supplemental request, which I underscored this morning before the Senate Appropriations Committee. First, we need to expand our surveillance work, building on an existing system we have within CDC's influenza surveillance network. Second, we will need funds to support public health preparedness and response for state and local governments for what could be a very large-scale response. We don't know, but we must prepare for that just in case. This support complements the significant funds that these partners have received from CDC for preparedness, about 2/3 of $1 billion a year in recent years. Third and fourth, we need to support the development of therapeutics and the development of vaccines. Given the scale of this outbreak, the private sector sees a real market for both kinds of countermeasures, as well as for diagnostics, but federal funding and guidance can accelerate this work. Dr. Fauci will address the current status of that work in more depth. Fifth and finally, we need funds for the purchase of personal protective equipment for the Strategic National Stockpile, a topic that Dr. Kadlec can address. I'll conclude by noting that though scheduling conflicts prevented this briefing from including other members of the President's coronavirus task force, we'll be providing a new update from interagency leaders soon, and we expect to continue doing so regularly. Earlier this afternoon on CNBC, the National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow offered an update on how we see this outbreak affecting the economy. This morning, Dr. Messonnier from CDC provided the usual telebriefing. As Dr. Schuchat will emphasize in just a moment, the Trump administration will continue to be aggressively transparent as the outbreak and our response evolve. We'll continue keeping the American people and the media apprised of the situation, as well as what everyone can do to prepare. In the meantime, I'll continue to work closely with President Trump and the President's task force on our preparations to keep Americans safe.
That is preparedness. That is preparedness. Now let's go and talk about the Warrior Dog Foundation because Mike has come along. Hello, Mike. Good morning. Great to have you.
Good morning, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you on because my friend Kelly has told me that Warrior Dog Foundation takes care of the animals that have taken care of our troops and our military families for years. Would you tell people what Warrior Dog Foundation does?
I'd be happy to. So essentially what we do is act as first and foremost as a sanctuary for really any dog that's worked in any capacity, whether it's military, police, customs, border patrol, federal law enforcement, you name it. And they're in a situation where, for whatever reason, whether it's temperament, injury, handler complications, is that they can't take care of the dog in its retirement or whenever it gets essentially washed out of training or their program. So to avoid euthanization, we step in and take these dogs and then do an initial evaluation and act as that sanctuary and rehabilitation component to be able to either adopt these dogs out to a competent individual that's qualified to take them, or we just continue to take them and let them live out their golden years in dignity and grace the way that they deserve.
Now, there are warrior dogs, contract working dogs, law enforcement dogs. They're all dogs that have served the public, sometimes at great risk to themselves, and they either get injured, they get old, or they can have PTSD, right?
That's correct. Sometimes we get dogs that are, 3-4 years old because they've got, a combination of PTSD or just, certain training issues, exposure to different elements that make them act a certain way to where they essentially become a bigger liability than they are an asset. And so, we work with them in a host of different capacities between feeding raw food and different rehabilitation programs, working with them in certain capacities to kind of unwind them, let them be a dog, and then ideally get them out and get them to a civilian individual that can take them. So it's the full process.
In your SEAL years, Mike Ritland, did you work with dogs in the teams?
Not in the teams. As I was getting out, I was offered a position to be a handler. I got out instead, started my own dog company, and came back as the trainer for the West Coast SEAL Team Canine program.
Well, it's a terrific thing because I think one of the things one of my sponsors, Honor Bound Coffee, does is support military families with their profits. And I consider these animals to be part of the extended military family. It's obvious you do as well.
Well, they absolutely are. I mean, they go with us everywhere. They fight with us. They die with us. And ultimately, they save countless lives on the battlefield. So they are integrated into our everyday lives as professional soldiers, just as much as any human being.
Well, the website is warriordogfoundation.org. How many animals have you got right now, Mike?
So right now we have 25 dogs on site, and in the last 10 years we've retired over 170 of them. So it's one of the things that I think surprises a lot of people too is that there's no federal funding, grants, or anything like that comes from the government. It's all privately funded through just generous folks out there, or charity trusts, things of that nature. So we're always in need of the gracious support of the American people.
Well, a lot of people have heart for animals that manifests itself in donations. WarriorDogFoundation.org is a specialized group, and as you tell people about it, does it light people up? Do you see that? I didn't know about it until Kelly told me about it.
It does. I mean, it's one of those things that really transcends politics and a lot of the divisive things that tend to separate us in our society today. American troops and animals are typically one that most people can get behind, and when you combine those two, it's kind of a no-brainer in terms of these dogs just need our help, and it's amazing to see how many people get behind them and really support them.
Mike Ritland, thank you, my friend. www.warriordogfoundation.org if you want to help them directly. www.warriordogfoundation.org. As I said to you, I'll be recommending to honorboundcoffee.com that they add Warrior Dog Foundation .org to their list of groups. 100% of the profits from Honor Bound Coffee go to support military families. They started with the Semper Fi Fund, Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund, because Pete and Seth Talbot heard me doing my annual fundraisers for them. Now they'll hear this, and I do believe in the all-encompassing view of the military as one large family. There are people all over the place, and that's why Pete and Seth and honorboundcoffee.org.com got started. I've got the dark roast in my hand. They've got 4 different grinds: espresso, drip, French press, and whole bean. They got 4 different flavors. Whatever it is that you want to use, honorboundcoffee.com. Please drink your coffee from them. And please get your relieffactor.com out. Do not delay another day, relieffactor.com. Relieffactor.com. Do not delay another day. Because when you get the opportunity, when you have the opportunity to go out there and take preemptive steps on aches and pains, support the temporary relief of minor aches and pains, that's when you should be doing it. When you're feeling pretty good. Maybe you've had trouble in the past. Maybe you fear it will come back. Maybe you want to stay in fighting trim shape. That's relieffactor.com. My Karen Kirkman, resveratrol, and Omega by Pete and Seth Talbot. And there are tens of thousands of you who have taken it already this morning in your car and you're feeling satisfied. You should be. The right way to start the day. It's the way I start every hour, the first hour, 3 hours a day. And now I remind people, if you're going out the door in Seattle, LA, San Francisco, Bakersfield, wherever you're listening to me, Fresno, go back in, get the relieffactor.com, then do the commute. And come back for the last segment on today's Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. It's going to be an interesting day on the market. I'm not in the prediction business. I just think it's oversold now, and that the president has done the right thing. He's put Mike Pence in charge. I want you to hear again what Mike Pence had to say at the White House yesterday. First, his comment on as soon as the president was done talking, he introduces Mike Pence. By the way, everybody will call back the president of the United States, and everybody will call back the vice president of the United States. That's about the only ones you are certain. Probably Mike Pence would be followed by Mike Pompeo, and you might call back the Secretary of Defense as well, but you're always going to call back the vice president. Here's what he said, cut number 24.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Trump's made clear from the first days of this administration we have no higher priority than the safety, security, health, and well-being of the American people. And from the first word of an outbreak of the coronavirus, the President took unprecedented steps to protect the American people from the spread of this disease. He recounted those briefly, but the establishment of travel restrictions, aggressive quarantine effort of Americans that are returning, declaration of a public health emergency, and establishing the White House Corona Task Force are all reflective of the urgency that the president has brought to a whole-of-government approach.
He went on to say this, cut number 29.
As a former governor from the state where the first MERS case emerged in 2014, I know full well the importance of presidential leadership, the importance of administration leadership, and the vital role of partnerships of state and local governments and health authorities in responding to the potential threat of dangerous infectious diseases. And I look forward, Mr. President, to serving in this role and bringing together all the members of the Corona Task Force that you've established, HHS, CDC, DHS, the Department of Transportation, and State. This team has been, at your direction, Mr. President, meeting every day since it was established. My role will be to continue to bring that team together, to bring to the president the best options for action to see to the safety and well-being and health of the American people.
It's going to be information. It's going to be action. Mike Pence is the perfect person. The Washington Post has just published my new column on the CBS debate Tuesday night. It begins, why was the Democratic debate on Tuesday night so awful? And it explains pretty much what Chuck, Todd, and I talked about. They just don't know how to do it. And they seemed adverse to making news, and they gave a pass to Joe Biden, and they just didn't know how to control things. But at the end of this column, I make the very simple recommendation, come the fall, the general election debate, President Trump ought to say, here's what we're doing. We'll use your times and places debate commission, but I'm naming one moderator. The nominee gets to name one moderator, and those two moderator names can agree on the third. That's a standard arbitration panel when there are parties that differ, because I do not think the question sets from mainstream media will be fair to President Trump. I believe it will be an ambush. But if you do it this way 3 times, he names one, the Democrat names one, those 2 people have been named, pick number 3, and then you let every single network get involved. It will be fair. And that's all. I just want tough questions asked of Democrats. They were not asked. Bernie Sanders caught a lot of flack, yeah, and going to still do fine on Super Tuesday because no one won, because there was no sustained follow-up. I mean, Joe Biden didn't even get asked about Nelson Mandela. Believe it or not, he did not get asked about this.
Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robbins Island.
All right, you heard it. He was not arrested on the streets of Soweto with Andrew Young. That's a lie, just like this.
I'm the guy that came back after meeting with Deng Xiaoping and making the case that I believe China would join if we put pressure on them.
That did not happen. It just didn't happen. Then he says stuff like this.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. Look me over if you like what you see.
He's not running for the Senate. He's running for the president.
Why am I stopping? No one else stops.
You got to stop because no one else is as poorly qualified for this. But hey, I think if you're in the Republican primary in if you're a Republican in South Carolina, go vote in the Democratic primary. It's your right. It's your legal right to do so. Vote for whomever you think you want to see on the ticket. I want to see Bernie Sanders because I want to defeat socialism in America once and for all. I know some of you disagree with me that. It's not because he's the easiest to beat. That's Elizabeth Warren. Don't try and pick losers. As Mitch McConnell said yesterday, that's not a good way to do it. Let me close by saying my friend Ken Williams, doctor in Orange County, the chairman of the Orange County Board of Education, loves charter schools, loves parents, loves kids. Great Christian man in the community, just terrific guy. Been around for 25 years that I've been out here. Is getting assailed by this crazy California lotto winner. I think it would be one of the best stories in America if people would pay attention to the fact that a California lottery winner thinks the best thing to do is to go run for office. It's the craziest doggone thing, but to my friends on the West Coast, please vote for Ken Williams. I hate to see people with too much money and not enough brains get into politics and destroy good incumbents who are doing their job. And Dr. Ken Williams is a great chairman of the County Board of Education and a good friend of mine. I'm talking today about the Nixon Library. I'll be back tomorrow to tell you all about it. In the meantime, we're getting closer in Super Tuesday. Get your ballots in the mail if you requested one early. And remember, Bernie Trump, that's the showdown we all need. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Talk to you tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.